In the age of hyper-articulation and hyper-detail in Star Wars action figures, it might be hard to recall the days when detail wasn't the main priority and playability was far more important. The toys were simple by comparison to the 21st century, but by 1978 standards, the details were impeccable. That level of detail made its way into the accessories as well, for the most part, but unlike today, there was a sort of any gun will do philosophy. Now, Hasbro will comb through the film frame by frame to find a unique weapon for each action figure. But back then, Kenner had a staple arsenal that they used to great effect. Like the figures from back then, the weapons have enough detail to get by, and are generally recognizable to their counterparts in the actual films. Or are they? Let's take a look and find out. Okay, well, even though they're not particularly detailed, they don't need to be. If it's a colored plastic stick in red, blue, green, or yellow, then it's a lightsaber. So to be clear, if it's one of those, or one of those, it's one of these. Alright, let's get to the bulk of the Kenner arsenal. The guns. The Star Wars line leaned on two main designs. The first is known among collectors as the Smuggler Blaster, the one made famous by Han Solo, and was used throughout Kenner's Star Wars toy line, though not as strongly in the Return of the Jedi series. As you can see, it has the same general profile as the Mauser props from the film. And a very sensitive trigger. The other A-lister weapon in the first series of Star Wars figures is the Imperial Blaster. At first glance, it may not resemble the film weapon to you, mainly because of the second magazine clip piece in front of the main grip. But make no mistake, this blaster is meant to depict the Stormtrooper blaster used prolifically in the Star Wars trilogy. This blaster was used quite a lot in Kenner's Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back lines, but once again all but disappeared during the Return of the Jedi era. In the early days, though, Kenner packaged this with a ton of action figures. The Stormtroopers, Cantina aliens, and even Boba Fett came with this gun. And with such a unique design, you couldn't miss. You cannot hit the broadside of a barn with this thing.
If you're a girl, you can.
That's true. Princess Leia was pretty deadly with it. Oddly, Kenner never gave any Leia figures this gun. They always saddled her with a tiny pistol meant to represent the one she carries in the opening of Star Wars. During the Return of the Jedi line, they gave her an even smaller pistol in her Endor version that was a direct match to the gun in that film. They also gave this pistol to a bunch of pilot figures from the Jedi line, and that sucked because it was the most easily lost weapon Kenner ever made. And that's saying something because they were all easy to lose. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Why give an Imperial like an AT-ST driver a Rebel blaster? Shouldn't he have an Imperial blaster? Whatever. The Return of the Jedi Rebel blaster doesn't hold a candle next to the original Rebel blaster, introduced during the Empire Strikes Back line. As a kid, I admit I thought this blaster was meant to represent the ones carried by the Bespin guards on Cloud City. But apparently it is supposed to be the blaster used by the Rebel soldiers in the opening of Star Wars. Once again, I'm confused. This blaster is rarely visible in the Hoth scenes, if ever, and never again after that. There was a set of promotional stills showing Lando with this blaster, as well as a series of group photos with Leia holding this weapon. I guess that's all the justification they needed. They even gave one to Bespin Han Solo. I'm convinced that was just a fat mistake they never bothered to correct. Every other Han Solo came with a Smuggler Blaster. This Rebel Blaster, sometimes called the Bespin Blaster, would have its last hurrah with Squid Head. Incidentally, the only denizen of Jabba's palace to get a decent weapon. The last major blaster made by Kenner was the huge Imperial rifle that was carried by the Snowtrooper and Dengar. It looked goofy in the Snowtrooper's hand because the Kenner figures didn't have swivel elbows, so the figure would just hold this massive rifle straight out in front of him. I don't know how Dengar ever held it. His hands were tiny. Sometimes people mistake this rifle for IG-88s, but oddly, Kenner voted to give him an entirely unique design, despite all the recycling they like to do. Go figure. After that, it's mostly odds and ends, with one exception. When they released the Empire Strikes Back line, the TIE Fighter pilot and the Cloud Car pilot came with this weird little gun. It looks more like a heat gun or a cordless drill. I know this pistol probably came from somewhere in the background in one frame of the movie, but for the life of me, I cannot find it. Frankly, it looks completely made up, like a leftover ray gun from Forbidden Planet. The closest match I can find to this pistol is the gun carried by the Breakfast Club principal in the opening of Ewoks, The Battle for Endor. And I know that wouldn't make sense because The Battle for Endor was produced long after The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. While I was putting these observations together, I noticed that there are a few action figures in this line that hold their weapons well. Most of the time, the pistol has to fit at a goofy angle due to the shape of the hands. Bespin Luke, Hoth Han, and Biker Scout are some of the worst. But there's a group of dudes here that throw down with style. So here's RetroBlasting's top 5 Star Wars vintage action figure gunslingers. Yes, the original Star Wars scoundrel shot from the hip, and his action figure is no different. In fact, unless we find out Jedi Luke Skywalker was a southpaw, Han Solo is the only figure to have a quick-draw firing arm. That ain't the kind of guy who fires second. They couldn't hit jack in the movies, but this figure shows us why. It isn't because they were inept. They were just trained execution style and not outright combat. The stormtrooper holds his rifle at a slight downward angle because most of the time he's shooting someone in the head a few feet in front of him on their knees. Annoying galactic revolutionaries! Star Wars weapons were easy to lose, so X-Wing Luke gets major points for the death grip he was given on his weapon. You could place his weapon in his hand and forget about it. It wasn't going anywhere. I really wish more of the figures had been given this style hand because I wouldn't have lost as many pistols. The added bonus is the way he holds it perfectly straight and level. That's Chow Yun-Fat confidence. If you take the excellent design of X-Wing Luke's hand and combine it with that Solo attitude, that's a winning combination. Endor Han had a great pose and a solid as a rock pistol grip. He also gets extra props for being the solitary Return of the Jedi figure to have a decent blaster hand. Bespin Han would have tied with Endor Han if he'd come with a smuggler blaster like he was supposed to. I always display mine with one. Seriously, try it sometime. It fits so well with Bespin Han, you can tell it was intended. Such a shame. Let me guess, you were expecting me to say Boba Fett? I can say I'm not sorry to disappoint you. Yes, Walrus Man is an ugly action figure, probably one of the worst in the Star Wars line for design, but his ugliness masks an awesome secret. Walrus Man knows how to hold a gat. The infamous Cantina Buttmouth isn't messing around when he decides to burn you down. That gun comes up in a strong grip, and he holds it on you at a dirty angle. Walrus Man is a Tatooine bone thug, and it isn't some small pistol either, but a full-on assault blaster. Everything about his style screams, "You got something to say before I kill you, fool?" Which, as we all know, is English for one of those, or one of those, is one of these. All right. If it's a colored stick in red, blue, green, or yellow,
Sorry.
and there was too much of a pause.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I'm trying to borrow this thing. Let's wait.